Welcome to the Church Leadership Podcast, your weekly source for encouraging and equipping local church leaders, with your hosts, Mark Gainey and Andy Frazier. In each episode, Andy and Mark sit down with church leaders that you should know. We believe these honest conversations will be helpful and encouraging to you as you lead the local church. Here is this week's episode.
Welcome to today's episode of the Church Leadership Podcast. We're so thankful that you've joined us for today's episode. And before we even get to our conversation, I want to remind you to go over and subscribe to our podcast. We don't want you to miss a single episode. You know, what we do each and every conversation, each and every episode is we want to bring you a conversation, a story, introduce you to a leader that helps encourage and equip you to lead in the local church. And we have a blast doing this. Whether it's just Andy and I talking or we're talking to a leader we think you should know, we have a lot of fun doing this, and we hope that you enjoy the podcast as well. And we would encourage you, and we would actually be so thankful if you would share this podcast with other people. You can share it on social media, text somebody, however you want to do it. But we were thankful that our podcast nation is growing, and you're continuing to invite others to be a part of what God is doing here. So today's conversation is going to be a little bit different. We don't have a third person on the podcast. We're continuing our really ongoing conversation about what we didn't learn in seminary, that series that we've been doing really every few episodes the last several weeks and months. And so we're going to continue that conversation today with something I believe is going to help you and encourage you as a pastor or as a church leader.
Maybe you're like us. The older you get, you're not amazed at how much you know, but how much you don't know.
That's exactly right.
And there are a lot of things that we don't know when we're in school. And we're thankful for formal theological education. We are so glad for those who have invested in our lives in seminary and ongoing education opportunities we have to learn for some great people. And listen, we learned so much here on the podcast. We know this is meant to help encourage and equip you as you watch and listen, but this is as beneficial to us as it is to anybody.
That's exactly right.
But like you, there are a lot of things we didn't learn, and maybe we wish we would have learned while we were in seminary, getting that good solid training.
That's right.
And there are so many topics that we could discuss and talk about. Some of them we could go on and on about. Some of the things we probably could have a 2-minute conversation and be done with about. But one of the things we're going to talk about today is kind of a pain point that a lot of us in the local church who are leading the church deal with, and that is, how do we hire the right person for our church?
Right.
I don't know about you. I never had hiring staff 101 in seminary. I never had that class, never read the book, never was introduced to the person who was the expert who guided us through the process in seminary.
No, that wasn't anywhere to be found. And again, I'm going to agree with Andy. This whole series about what we didn't learn in seminary, it's certainly not to diminish or dog, formal education, because we believe in that. One of our sponsors here at the podcast is all about that. And so I've been to 3 different seminaries, and I've loved every one of them. And so we wholeheartedly, endorse getting formal training. However, no system is perfect.
That's right.
And there's no such thing as a perfect education.
And there's only so much you can learn in the classroom.
That's right.
As well.
You're going to learn more on the job. Yeah. OJT, right?
That's right.
Hands-on experience. And this is one of those things where we really do wish there was some way for seminaries or for us to have learned this in seminary, how to hire the right staff. Because, and look, we're going to go ahead and admit, as Andy has already said, we've learned really more about this by doing it the wrong way. And finally, we believe God has kind of helped us understand how to do it the right way. And so, typically, when we say the wrong way, I guess there's no wrong way or right way biblically, but I guess in terms of results, we've done it the wrong way a few times. And, the typical approach for any church, if they're bringing in a pastor, is to, form a search committee, pulpit committee, however you want to call it. And then they pour over hundreds, sometimes even thousands of resumes, and they pick the ones they like the best, and then they contact them. And maybe they have an interview. These days, it's probably a Zoom interview at first. And then they have an in-person interview, and they boil it down to the top 3 and maybe the top 1, and they bring that person in and have a lengthy discussion. Maybe, they give them tour of the campus and things like that. And then they make the decision and bring that person in for a view of the call. And they preach kind of a trial sermon, however you want to call that, sermon in view of a call. And then they make the decision. The church votes, right? And so here's what's happened. Sometimes they have a reception the night before to meet and really get to know the pastor. So what happens is they have created a blind date situation, right? And I mean, I've been hired that way. And it's where two groups of people, the church, the pastor and his family, do not know one another. They've had one date and they decide to get married. I mean, that's really what happens. And then that does not work, by the way. That does not work. It can work just like a blind squirrel can find a nut every now and then, but it just doesn't work. And then on the other side of that, as a pastor or as a church, bringing in other staff, which is probably more common. Even if it's bivocational, part-time staff, or whatever that looks like, even volunteer staff. Typically, we try to do the same thing, right? We look at resumes, we post a job, we scour over the resumes, we bring some people in for interviews, and we decide out of that who to hire. And again, same situation. Is it any wonder that we have so much turnover in our churches and bad experiences? So we believe that's what we've done before, and a lot of churches do, but there's probably a better approach.
Yeah, I mean, we were blessed several episodes back to have William Vanderbloemen on, and if you're familiar with him at all, his agency is the number one agency in probably the world, but definitely in the United States for helping evangelical churches find and make matches with potential lead pastors or staff members. But what we've found is in the average church, the church that's 250 or less, that process looks a lot different than it does for a church that has 1,500 people.
That's right.
And many times that blind date that Mark's talking about, it comes based on some inside information. Somebody in the church, more times than not, has a connection to a potential candidate. It's, somebody's neighbor's nephew that they know that graduated seminary, or somebody that served in the area a while back or whatever. So there's generally some kind of connection. I would say the majority of the time, not all of the time. So that blind date has a little bit of information that's being exchanged prior to the official date.
Yeah. If we're talking about dates, you've been set up.
Yeah.
Right, so somebody's setting you up here. That's right.
And here's the thing about this whole process. You've probably been there. We've been there. We've been in situations where we've interviewed with potential churches and realized it wasn't a match. And maybe churches have turned you down, like I've been turned down several times, where I thought maybe something was moving forward and they went with somebody else. But I think a lot of the issue involved in this whole process of whether it's you're the candidate searching for a church or whether you're the one who is helping the church fill a staff position or a key leadership position is to be really honest. Because one of the things we found is candidates and churches don't represent themselves in a 100% candid, honest way. They kind of misrepresent themselves and make themselves look a little better than they actually do. Obviously, you want to stand out. You want your church to be a church that somebody is attracted to, but most of the time there's a little information that maybe they're holding back.
There may be a bit of embellishing of resumes or experience, and some not so transparent communication.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, and my dad taught me early on that horse traders are a lot like car salesmen. They may not be 100% honest with you by lying to you, but they're not going to be 100% honest with you because they may withhold information that might have been helpful.
Yes.
And I tend to believe that happens a lot on the church's side. Maybe there are things that you're scared to share with a candidate that it might cause that person to turn away and run and go somewhere else. But I think it's good to be honest. But I think the pain point we're talking about earlier is how do we find the right persons? Maybe this whole process of the setting up a blind date, maybe that's not the best way to go about things.
That's right.
Maybe we should kind of step back and look at our whole process for looking at the position itself that we're wanting to fill, but also who would be a good fit for that.
That's right. I think I'm a proponent for actually turning the process completely on its head. And I believe there's a better approach. We believe that there's a better process involved for everybody. When we say that, what we mean is we believe churches can approach the process completely differently, and candidates also. But I'll tell you this, just from experience, if a church doesn't change their approach, the candidate's not going to change their approach.
That's
right? If the church is going to be withholding, the candidate's going to be withholding. Candidates, just not going to be completely honest because that process looks the same, as it has been. So, what Andy and I are going to share, we're not by any means saying we have all the answers and that this is the perfect process or anything like that. What we're going to share is from our experience, what we found to be genuinely effective, successful, and honestly encouraging and uplifting in a different approach to bringing staff in the church.
Yeah, let me just start by saying this, Mark. The church is not just a nonprofit organization that needs a CEO or that needs a corporate leader or that needs a manager. The church is Jesus' body, and we need people who are disciples and who are committed to making disciples. So my greatest encouragement to you in this whole process, no matter how you want to go about it, is to look at character over competency. I think having the experiences that I've had and the experiences that you've had and most of us have had, that you can work towards helping someone become more competent in an area that you want to put them in and place them in leadership. But you can't build character. Character it's either there or it's not kind of a thing. So look at somebody who's got this ongoing, growing relationship that's fruitful with Jesus, that's got a handle on how to lead and disciple their family, and that's got some kind of track record of not just being evangelistic or not just leading a small group well or leading in a church well, but just has this ongoing reputation of how they deal with people in general. Yes. That the character is there, because I promise you, you can have somebody who is, just through the roof, has potential and competency and all of these abilities and has a padded resume, but if they don't have the character to match, that is destined to fail. It's going to hurt you, it's going to hurt your church, and it's going to backlash even on them. So we can give multiple examples of that. But
that's right.
I think there's a way to approach just about any way you want to hire a staff member or a key leader as far as the process or the strategy. But I think number one is to look at character.
Absolutely. So, if you think about it in terms of, athletics, you would say a coach is looking for people with those intangibles, because you can always coach them up, right? And that's the way it is with people we bring on our staff team, whether they're volunteer staff, part-time staff, full-time staff. You can always coach those people up in skills, like Andy said, but absolutely character matters. And so, just as an example, right now our church is looking at a very, very, very part-time position, kind of an intern type position, and so what we've done is we've kind of created what we desire, and character is all in that, no skill at all. And what we're looking for is someone who is kind of a shepherd of people and loves people first and foremost. Of course, somebody that follows Jesus and is committed to making disciples, but we want somebody who loves people, and that's what we want. And we can fit the skills in after that. And so in that process, I would say after you decide that character is going to be first and look for those intangibles, I would even say back up a bit and say, okay, well, are we hiring the right position? Because part of the problem, I think, is we just hire positions because it's what we've always done.
Right.
We need a youth guy, or we need a student person, or we need a children's person, or whatever. Well, maybe think outside the box and think creatively in terms of, okay, where our church is, where do we want our church to be, and what's the missing part here? What's the gap that needs to be filled? Or, better yet, who is somebody that's got the character in our church already? Who's somebody that is stepping up already, and what are they gifted to do, and can we bring them on our team?
Yeah, I think that's key. We are in a day and age where the paradigm of hiring full-time positions for multiple staff people, I think, is starting to really shift and change. And it's been my experience and my passion, and where I've invested a lot of time and effort in is trying to staff a church in a very non-traditional way, to accomplish the church's mission without trying to have this huge personnel budget. And I know that sounds crazy, but it works if you go about it the right way.
That's right.
And what Mark is mentioning, maybe that person you're wanting to hire, it might not benefit your church to hire one full-time person to fill that position, but what if you had the opportunity to hire 2 or even 3 part-time people to fill multiple positions that would benefit your church even greater? So the hiring process of doing that, a lot of people immediately go to all of these outside resources. They go to their local association or their state office, or there's all these search databases that you can look through resumes on. How amazing would it be, instead of looking outside of your church, as you started looking inside your church?
That's right.
And maybe if you see the need coming on down the road, maybe it's not an immediate need right now. What if you started not just grooming someone, what if you started discipling and equipping someone who could lead that ministry, who's part of your church? They've already got the sweat equity. That's right. They already have bought into the mission of your church, and they've already built relationships. Some of those key
That's
things.
right.
What if that happened? I mean, I think it would transform the culture of a lot of churches to think, all right, how do we hire from within and without?
Right.
We've heard it said, it's better to build them than go and buy them.
That's right. I think the approach of trying to bring in a hired gun to accomplish a task, those days may not be over for large churches, but I think it should be, because that approach doesn't work. So just to give you an example. So again, we've learned this the hard way. I have made some awful hires in my ministry career by trying to bring in the hired gun. I was looking at skills, I was looking at reputation and all this, and sometimes it worked out, but a lot of times it was a train wreck, quite honestly. And so currently right now, just to give you kind of a picture of where we're coming from. We always talk about normal sized churches or normative churches. That's where we are. We pastor those churches. And so we've got 7 staff members on our church right now, 7. Out of those 7 staff members, 2 of them are volunteer staff members. And I want to say that because you heard me right. They're volunteer staff members. That means they do not get paid. But they are as much a part of our staff team as anybody who's paid. It's not that we value them less. It's their life situation. They either are retired or they have full-time jobs and they don't want to work here for pay. And so we have 7 staff members. 2 of them are volunteer staff, and then we have 4 part-time or bivocational staff members, and then I'm the only full-time staff member, and I'm co-vocational myself. And so that's our staff team. Now here's what's crazy. Out of those other 6, so I'm the pastor, out of those other 6 staff members, every single one of them was either a member of our church before we hired them, except one. So all the rest were members of our church before we brought them on staff. And all of them have either been discipled by me or by someone I discipled. And so every single one of them. And so it's a unique situation. I've never had it, and it's the best staff team I've ever been around. I told them that yesterday in our staff meeting. I'm loving ministry because of them. And so to me, they're my dream team. But they were already, all except one, were here already. And the other one was in our community already. So he's familiar with the community. And so what we do, I'll just tell you our approach. I'm not saying again it's perfect, but we typically try to bring people on volunteer staff first, or very, very, very part-time staff. Again, most of them are in-house, and they get a taste of ministry, and we put them in areas that they're passionate about, and they get an idea of what our church is all about, how the staff works, and then as it continues, we make them more substantially part-time, still part-time, and one day, we're not there yet, but one day we may bring them on full-time, if that's what God's plan is. But that's kind of our approach. We want to bring people up, disciple them up, and then bring them on the staff team kind of when the cream rises to the top.
Yeah, I think that maybe a future episode we talk about size dynamics, what it looks like in a different size church to staff or to facilitate things and to lead change and stuff like that. Might be a good topic, but I think most of the people who watch or listen are probably in the same boat we are. Maybe they don't have this ginormous budget where they can just go hire anybody they want to, go rob or steal somebody from another church and make them a better offer to come to their church. What we're talking about here is such a big change that you're not going to see this happen overnight. It's going to be something that you invest in over time.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And Mark's been here long enough now. He's starting to see that investment really have benefits, fruits starting to bear from planting those seeds and watering those seeds and seeing some of those great things happen. So many times what people want by hiring someone outside is they want instantaneous results.
Yeah.
They want somebody with the resume and with a record and with the charisma to come in and lead that ministry or that key area, and they want to see instantaneous results. They want to see maximum results for what they're investing in somebody. And that's okay. I'm not saying that's terrible, but you got to think long haul. If you're thinking for the future of your church and for the future of the families in your church and the community that your church is in, I mean, how awesome would it be for your church to be a hub, to build people up, invest in them, and equip them, and not only to let them lead in the local church. I think that's going to change the sending capacity of your church to be able to build people up. And what if you trained, equipped, and gave somebody experience as a staff member in your church, and then all of a sudden maybe they are such a dynamic leader that they would be a better fit at another church or at a church plant, or the limits are not there. That's when you start thinking that way. You're limiting yourself by hiring somebody from the outside and putting that pressure on them to come in and demand results from them. So and that's where that whole character comes in. Like we were talking about earlier, you're watching people, you're investing in people, you're discipling people, you're seeing that character lived out in their life. And it's kind of hard to mislead someone who's already been a part of a church for a while before you give them those opportunities. They already know who you are. They already know your warts and your faults and and all those things about you. And you know enough about them that you know that could be a good fit. And the other thing I've found too is it may be the whole dynamic of, all right, this person is a person of character, and you try to equip them to serve in a certain area, and all of a sudden you see, you know what? Maybe they would be a better fit over here. And the benefit of doing that is that person's not going to run off and leave your church. They're not going to go look for a better job somewhere else. They're they're committed to your church. So they'd be willing to make those necessary changes to help them with their gifting and passion and experience and those kind of things. So I think what we're talking about may be crazy enough to work, because I think it kind of is.
Yeah, it is. It is crazy. And it is we understand it's a different approach, but I guess our hope this conversation is to challenge you to think a little bit, to reconsider, think outside the box. And look, I've had to do that. We've had some interviews and conversations on this podcast with church leaders that have challenged my thinking, especially on what you mentioned before about the exporting. And over the last year, actually in the last 9 months, we've had 2 staff members that were part-time staff members that were on our team that we've exported. And it was a beautiful thing. It was very hard to say goodbye to both of them. One moved to a different city and is going to be used by God eventually to be a church planter. And another one obviously exported, moved to another city as well, and is serving on staff at another church now. And just actually got a position at another church. And so those kind of things are, when we're thinking about hiring people and bringing in experts, that hurts when they leave. When you do it that way, hurts even worse, not because of relationship, because you feel like you've been betrayed, right? And they're leaving for the better, greener pasture. But in our case, it hurt only because the relationship isn't going to be as close in proximity physically. But man, it was such a blessing, because now our church has connection to those other churches, and we believe we have sent missionaries on the field, and that is a game changer. But we brought them up from membership, and they got training, equipping, got a taste of ministry, and now they are serving elsewhere. And it's a blessing. It really is, and it is a paradigm shift. And so we wouldn't expect your church or your staff team to change overnight, and we certainly don't recommend you go fire everybody and anything like that. But maybe reconsider how the next time you need to bring a staff member on, think about the process and consider how you maybe can do it differently.
Yeah. How do we hire the right person? Well, I mean, obviously, you can't ignore the first step, and that is you got to pray.
That's right.
You got to pray and ask the Lord to lead you, to lead your church, and to lead the right person to be ready to step up and take that. But I mean, don't ignore the elephant in the room. Maybe you're praying about a person who you think is going to come in and from the outside and from some other church or from seminary and come in and magically change the culture of your church. Maybe that person is in your small group right now.
That's right.
Maybe that person you're having coffee with once a week and you're doing life with and you're investing in them. So maybe that person's right under your nose and you never even realize it. And God can allow you to give them a chance to continue to do that. And let me just say, make sure your key leaders in your church are constantly discipling people, but also constantly giving them opportunities to raise up the next person to fill their spot. Because just like Mark said, you never know when you're going to send somebody out. You never know when a life change is going to happen. And you're constantly building that farm system.
That's right.
And it's an amazing thing. So we just wanted to encourage you with that today, to think through something in maybe a different way. Maybe some of you in seminary were taught this is how you hire. You get a search committee, you get the resumes, you go through the interview process, and you have them come in for the view of the call and have the official vote. Well, whatever is in your church bylaws, obviously you're going to have to go by your church's guiding documents, but maybe you can step back and rethink the traditional way of doing things and think, maybe there is a better way. Maybe we've had several oopses in a row with hiring people and we just don't know what to do next. Maybe the answer is to build them up to fill those positions.
That's right. Maybe not a setup or a blind date, but courtship. Imagine that. It still works. Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode and this conversation. And we hope it's encouraged you and equipped you to lead in the local church.
Yeah, we hope this episode helps you maybe hire the next person from within that's going to be a blessing in helping you make disciples of your church.